If you hang around a gun range, a driving range, or basically anywhere where guys are engaged in a hobby that requires gear, you're going to hear the phrase, "It's the Indian, not the arrow." And to that point, there's guys like Rob Latham, who's one of the most accomplished practical pistol shooters of all time, who competes with the Springfield Armory XD9. Or Shane Coley, who's the captain of Team Glock, and he competes with a plastic pistol in a division dominated by multi-$1,000 2011s. And that's all well and good for them, but what about us mere mortals? So I wanted to have a bit of fun and test this. So I wanted to see if I could make my everyday carry, a Glock 48, compete in the deep end of practical shooting in USPSA Open Division. Are you ready? Stand by. Now before we go any further, you may have noticed this is a Glock 48 and the video title says a Glock 43X. Yes, we're going to be modifying this pistol extensively, and you'll see why that makes sense here in a moment. And before you guys pile on, since I'm going to modify this gun extensively, saying it's the Indian, not the arrow, I'm going to be competing in a division with multi-$1,000 purpose-built race guns. So I need a little bit of an edge, and I'm going to get that through some modifications. And that brings us to our first chance to comment. Would you carry a gun like this in its finished state, heavily modified? Let me know in the comments. Now, if practical shooting with polymer guns and irons is kind of like NASCAR, then Open Division in USPSA would be the equivalent of F1 style racing. The guns basically have no restrictions other than magazine length. They are all built on the 2011 platform with very light 2-pound or less triggers. They feature a frame-mounted optic that stays mostly static, and recoil makes sighting much faster and easier. The guns are heavy, between about 40 to as much as 60 plus ounces, which helps keep them flat in recoil. They shoot 9mm projectiles between about 1350 and 1500 feet per second for maximum points, achieving major scoring. To tame the recoil from that, they feature an aggressive compensator that makes a super hot round feel about like shooting a target-loaded 9mm. And their magazines can tend to hold between about 29 and 31 rounds. Now, an inexpensive open gun is going to cost about $3,000, and they more typically run between about $5,000 up to about $10,000. So we really are wading into the deep end as far as gear is concerned. But the challenge stands. Can a slimline concealed carry gun hang with multi-$1,000 2011s in competition? It's going to be an uphill battle, but the challenge stands, and we've got some work to do on this guy. So this whole idea got started when I found out about the Shield Arms S15 magazines. The stock Glock 48 magazines hold about 10 rounds. These will hold 15, and with the +5 bases, they will hold 20 rounds. Now 20 is still a lot fewer rounds than 29 or 31, but it puts us in roughly the same ballpark. I'm gonna have to reload once per stage, and it's gonna be earlier than the open guys who can use big sticks. And as I mentioned, getting an optic mounted on the frames out of the question, so I went to Suarez International and I bought their Street Comp upper. It is a Glock 43X slide with a threaded barrel, a Street Comp compensator, co-witness irons, and the slim frame adapter that allows me to mount the optic on it. So while the gun will have a compensator, it is a very short compensator. This whole gun is going to fit in Glock 48 holsters. The open guns that I'm going to be competing against are going to have much larger ports that vent much more gas upward, keeping recoil very minimal. While this compensator does work, and I can back that up with numbers here in a bit, it's not going to be nearly as aggressive as what I'm going to be running against. And the reason this is so appealing with the 43X slide length and not the 48 is the 43X slide's a bit lighter, and the compensator is going to calm down the muzzle rise, so the gun is going to cycle faster, and because it's going to stay on target, it's going to behave like a much larger gun. And honestly, it shoots about like my Carry Optics competition gun, although it's a little more twitchy. And the dot on the RMR actually won't even leave the screen thanks to the compensator. Now for an optic, I decided to use the RMR Type 2 3 MOA dot that I already had to help keep costs down. And the RMR is great as a concealed carry optic because it's very robust, so if I roll around on the holster or do anything like that, the optic's not in any danger of getting crushed. There'll be a link in the description where you can see how the RMR prices are tracking right now. So with the major elements of an open gun in place through the optic and compensator, I decided to see if I couldn't make the bottom end be more like a 2011 as far as controls were concerned. So I reached out to the folks over at the GlockStore, and they came through in a major way. Now, if you check out the description, there is a link to my Patreon page where I have a blog post that has links to all of the parts that I use. And if you follow my Instagram and my profile, there is a discount code where it can save you some money on these parts. Now, the first item is the mag catch. Because the Shield 15 round magazines have a metal body, they tear up the plastic OEM mag catch, so I had to swap that out for an aluminum one. Got the GlockStore extended checkered aluminum one. It's got a great texture on it. So if you're doing a Shield 15 round magazine, you're gonna need an aluminum mag catch. Next, there was the reduced power tungsten guide rod. Since I am compensating this pistol, it's going to recoil less, requiring less spring to return it, and the added mass of the tungsten is going to help it settle in from recoil and settle in off transitions a bit better. And the next three bits are all going to go into the gun at the same time. They are the extended slide lock, the extended slide release, and the ultimate full pyramid trigger kit with a flat face trigger. The trigger is fully adjustable, so I've taken out a good bit of pre-travel and most of the over-travel while keeping the gun drop safe. Since it comes with an extended firing pin, I can reduce the trigger pull weight without sacrificing reliability. Since this is also a concealed carry gun, obviously that's going to be important. Now, I'm using the 4.5 pound striker spring, which is giving me about a 3 3/4 pound trigger, which is about as much as I'd want for a concealed carry gun, despite this being used in competitions. But it comes with a 4 and I believe a 3 and maybe even a 2 pound spring, so you can really drop the trigger weight if you want, but I don't want it to go ammo sensitive, so 4.5 pounds was fine for me. And another nice feature of the kit is that most of the internals are titanium nitride coated, which gives the trigger pull an excellent quality that's not there in the stock Glock format. Now, traditionally with a trigger job, it is a very subjective description. You can't really quantify what's changed other than how much the trigger pull weight came down. Now, thanks to the good folks over at MantisX, they sent me the X10 Elite, which I was able to fasten to the base pads that they offer. So using their benchmark software, I was able to test it both ways with both the OEM setup and the full pyramid setup. Now, keep in mind that the results on a trigger job are going to differ for just about everybody. I'm a high A class, low master class shooter in USPSA. I have pretty good to strong fundamentals, and I can shoot most guns pretty well. So if you're further back on the path in developing technique, the effects may be more exaggerated for you, but ultimately what I'm about to share with you, I was satisfied with. So shooting the benchmark test for bullseye accuracy, I saw about a 5% increase in my scores switching to the pyramid trigger. That 5% improved to about a 6% increase when I switched to a practical style trigger pull like I would do in a USPSA match, taking less care on straight to the rear and having more of a sense of urgency. And that could be the difference between firing a makeup shot at a steel plate that I missed or accepting an edge hit and moving on without the makeup. So I was really pleased with how the trigger turned out. And since nobody makes mag wells for a concealed carry gun, and I understand why not, the gun's basically done at this point. And in the process, I have broken just about every rule there is to keep Glocks running reliably. But that's why we test gear. Let's see how it holds up to practice. Now, as far as how I'm going to actually be competing with this, I'm not going to use a traditional outside the waistband holster. I'm going to use a more typical concealed carry rig with an appendix inside the waistband holster and mag carriers. So Harry over at Harry's Holsters sent me this prototype holster that he's making, and unfortunately you can't buy these yet, but it has a modified claw that doesn't get in the way when I actually draw. Most holsters with claws will ding my middle knuckle when I'm doing a lot of dry practice with them. This holster specifically won't do that. And before we move on from the rig, realize that only Mega Chads carry with the Harry's Holsters, and you can be a Mega Chad by saving 10% with the code TheHumbleMarksman at checkout. And before we move off that, yes, I did ask him about left-handed holsters, and yes, he hates all of you. So with the MantisX, I was actually able to see how much recoil was reduced using their recoil meter that was built in. And what I saw at the range was that it reduced the vertical muzzle climb by about 25%, and it reduced the recoil width by about 10%. So it is actually tangibly doing something, and you can see it in the MantisX, which is pretty darn cool. I'm going to be using this to tune up my competition guns moving forward. So with the gun out of the way, let's work on the competitor. Now, I have been competing in USPSA for about the past 3.5 years, so I generally finish in the top 5, if not top 10 at my local club. which is a club match of about 80 to 90 shooters. My goal is to finish in that roughly the same place using the little baby open gun. So to figure out where I was starting, I set up a drill at my range with 3 open targets at 10 yards and 2 shooting boxes about 2 yards apart. The drill was easy. It was draw and fire 2 shots at each target, reload as you move between boxes, and then fire 2 more shots at each target. Now forgive me because I am gonna have to look at my notes to tell you this stuff. So I was able to shoot the drill with my carry optics rig with 7 alphas and 5 charlies in 5.3 seconds, which is a hit factor of 10.7891. And then using my open minor rig, I shot 8 alphas and 4 charlies in 7.24 seconds, which is a hit factor of 7.1823, which is about 66.5% of my carry optics score. USPSA scoring is the points you shot divided in the time it took you to shoot them, so it is an accuracy and speed game. So not being satisfied with that, I reached out to Applied Performance Shooting here on YouTube. He's a firearms trainer, does a lot of content on getting better at the concealed carry set, and he was able to tune me up a little bit. This is what he had to say.
All right, Humble, so first thing I would do is lose the undershirt so you can be super aggressive, belly button slap, grab that garment. Then I want you to not have any shoulder shrug, plucking that pistol out from going in on it instead of down on it, because when you draw, your hand comes down, right hand, then up, then down again. So we want to take all that out, come in, swoop in, pluck that thing out of there, and then you're golden. Pluck, pin, and sweep. Grabbing the center, we want to pin that shirt with the radial side of our wrist, and then sweep to the mag, and that'll simulate your race gear reloads and make everything really consistent.
So I took the tips from APS and immediately applied them, and I was able to get my draw down to about a 1 to 1.2 second draw. So a lot of shooting fast is confidence, and I'm not really gonna have the time to burn in that confidence on this rig with this gun. So while I can do in dry fire a 1 to 1.2 second draw, I can't really do it on the range. So probably gonna be in the 1.2 to 1.4 area, and that's just gonna be the way it is, unfortunately. Now, obviously the reload is not gonna be as fast as it would be in my gamer belt due to having to clear the garment every time you want to reload, but hopefully we can make it less bad. So I began a dry fire program of near daily dry fire of at least 10 to generally 20 to 25 minutes. And I would augment that dry fire with live fire 1 to 2 times a week. And on mornings where it was too cold in the garage to do meaningful dry fire, I would stay in the house and work on my trigger control using the MantisX, which a red dot gives you a ton of information and gets you good pretty quick. The MantisX gives you even more information. So it is a very useful practice tool. I'm honestly surprised how much use I've gotten out of it, but it's been very useful in developing a sound trigger pull on this little gun. At the range, I began by working doubles, which is just pairs of rapid fire shots on a same target, trying to understand how much waiting I needed to do for the gun to settle down. Now, obviously, the littler, lighter gun is going to be twitchier than my Glock 34 that I typically compete with. But through practice, I was able to understand kind of the timing at various distances of what I needed to be doing to get good hits. Running some drills where movement was involved, it became very clear that the gun was twitchier and I was going to have to do a lot more aiming while trying to shoot on the move. So for my final range day before the match, I shot the same drill over again, and this time I was able to lay down 11 alphas, 1 Charlie in 5.98 seconds, which is a 9.7808 hit factor, or roughly 90.6% of my carry optics run. So that's a big improvement, about 25 percentage points of where I started. So I'm very pleased with how training went. So over the past month, I was able to do about 20 dry fire sessions and 7 range trips totaling about 1,200 rounds through this setup here. I'm happy to report that I only had 1 malfunction, and that was when the slide was new back from Cerakote. It had a failure to eject. As the Cerakote wore in on the mating surfaces, I haven't had any issues. I did not clean the gun until right before the match. So that's about 1,000 rounds of use before I cleaned the gun before the match, and it had no problem. So I'm very pleased with how the gun turned out. And the day of the match, the conditions were okay. It was cold and it rained on us midday, but not enough to scare us off. However, all of my footage taken at the range is worthless due to wind noise because it was a windy day. So the first stage was a stage with a lot of uprange movement. I kind of took it easy and didn't really try and get on the gas pedal too much, and realized really quickly just how bad the reload was going to be slowing me down. So that said, I focused on just executing what I knew I could do and not trying to get over my skis, and it went okay. The second stage was a memory stage that took some tough leans to not shoot in more than about 2.5 positions, but thankfully I'm used to shooting points and I have to shoot points shooting a minor gun, and the stage turned out pretty well for me. And on the barrel stage, I have to say the accuracy for the gun was incredible. I had 2 targets shot at about 15 to 17 yards, where the bullet holes could be covered with a single paster. So the gun is very accurate when I was doing my part. On the third stage, there was an activator sequence that the 2 mini poppers triggered 2 swingers. The way I intended to tackle the sequence was going to be steal, steal, swinger, swinger, and then exit on the static paper into the final position. But what ended up happening was steal, steal, swinger, swinger, and I called a mic on the dot. I went to the paper as the swinger went behind the barrels, came back onto the swinger and sent a makeup shot, but that mic'd too. I saw it on the dot again. Knowing that I was short on rounds, I went to the final position to finish the stage, and the stage didn't go terribly, but I took my first mic for the day. The 5th stage was pretty much a straightforward execution stage, but again, I just couldn't get on the trigger fast with all the partial targets. But sticking in and getting my hits, it still turned out okay, but golly, I wish I could reload faster. Now the 6th stage was interesting as it had a balance beam on it and a weighted gun case. You had to carry the weighted gun case from one barrel to a finishing barrel, and you could either carry it with both hands, which put the weight way out in front of your feet, which was weird for swinging the gun in transition, or you could go out and shoot all the targets, come back, get the case, then run up to the final position. So I shot it strong hand only and it went okay. I just sent 1 makeup shot at the popper that I missed, and in the last position I kind of missed my footing, and shooting the last target was a very hard lean for me. But all said, I shot all alphas, which on a stage like that, which was a lowish hit factor stage, worked out okay. Both of the classifiers were unremarkable. On the first classifier, I had a mic entering the 2nd position, so it was a mid-C classifier. And on the 2nd classifier, it had a mandatory reload, which we know reloads are an issue. So all in, I finished 6th out of 15 shooters in open division at 78% of the Grandmaster who won the division. On the overall match, I finished 9th of 76 shooters, which is about what I was hoping to accomplish. But what's interesting is you just saw all the stages. I wasn't running around real fast shooting hair on fire, but I did focus on just doing what I knew I could do and basically shooting at my confidence level with this gun. And in the end, I got a good result from doing that. And you're not supposed to compare yourself to people who shoot in other divisions. But amusingly, I would have finished 2nd in pistol caliber carbine. So I would have been the 2nd rifle shooter with a Glock 43X, which is really amusing to me. So if you're interested in shooting USPSA, I recommend it highly. I would probably not recommend the Glock 43X with the comp as your competition gun, but this is a really fun gun to shoot and makes a great concealed carry gun. I want to thank the people who made this video possible, the good folks over at the GlockStore, MantisX, and Harry over at Harry's Holsters. Without you guys, this wouldn't be possible. Please subscribe if you made it this far, like the video if you haven't done it yet. Check out my Patreon, and I've got links in the description as I mentioned. It was a lot of fun doing this, guys, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care, guys.
All right, Andy, this is your last chance to shoot your dick off.